Wanted to invite you just as we're sitting here to notice something that's very obvious, but often seems to be somewhat overlooked, which is how this, for lack of a better word, it's a good word, doesn't have any baggage associated with it. Not really any ideas that we have about this. There's just this that's here that's appearing. Call it reality if you'd like. That I mean, its dynamic nature, it cannot be overstated how, and as I say these words, just invite you to tune into your experience to notice what I'm talking about. Um, I mean, it's so unstable. It's constantly slipping away, isn't it? I mean, every flash instant, it's a completely new world, we could say, never before seen. It's just like, like the moment that we conventionally think of as having a certain kind of stability. Like here it is, I'm sitting here doing my thing, leading, the Zoom meeting. It's really laughable when you look and to realize that the actual experience that I'm describing as sitting here talking to you is what's it like now, and what's it like now, and what's it like now, and what's it like now, what's it like now. Do you feel that? How absolutely um unstable and discontinuous, what we call experiences, this that's here. You feel that? Looks different. What's being perceived is never the same, right? What's the old saying? You never step in the same river twice. Like here's the river of experiencing. You're not ever going to step in the same river because it's dynamism. It's right. It's constantly the details showing up. And this is what we miss, that when we make a generalized statement about this is what's going on, that's exactly what it is. It's a generalized statement about what's happening, where you are, what the felt senses of the moment, and so on. We make this sort of general statement about it, and then we talk about it as if it carries forward into the next moment. But the actual the particulars, the particularities of what we call the moment, the details are all it takes as the moment's being perceived is one little tiny little detail, new detail to enter into the picture, right? A new detail in the form of like a little buzzing sound or a little rumble in your stomach or a little flicker of light, or noticing something in the visual field or a thought that flickers for a second. Or do you see what I mean? Like in each instant, new details, we could say, are entering the picture, right? And in the new details that seem to be arising and appearing, suddenly the whole is not the same. If new details are entering into the picture, fresh details that weren't being perceived, what you're perceiving is not the same thing from moment to moment. We can only create the fantasy of that by overlooking the fact that, wow, now it's like this, and now it's like this, and now it's like this, and now it's like this. You've never been here before. You've never been in this particular universe. And then now you've never been in this universe. And it's not the same universe from moment to moment. That's a generalization. I mean, we could think about it. It's like it's the same universe and it's being experienced in all these different ways in each flash moment. But where's the evidence of that? Because we know the moment by experiencing the moment, and the experience of the moment is just has no endurance to it. It's got no stability, right? I was reflecting on this recently, um, that I talk about what I'm sharing with you right now with some of my graduate students, psychology students, and not infrequently when I start to talk like this, it starts to feel unsettling to them. Like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, I want stability. I want security. I want to feel like that this is somehow under my control and my, right? So it's like it feels like my words are pulling the rug out from underneath that. And in some sense, that's true. I'm pulling the rug out. Well, really, what I'm pointing out is that reality is just constantly pulling that rug out from underneath us, that desire for stability and security. But here's a funny thing. The paradoxical nature of this is that this is always here. This has no stability, but it's always here, which sounds insane to say. It has no stability whatsoever, just slipping away, slipping away, slipping away, slipping away. But it's always here. This is indestructibly here. Like no matter what is happening, and this is so powerful to feel this, no matter your experience is just all over the place, right? It's just all over the place. Sometimes we like it, sometimes we don't like it. Sometimes it's understandable, sometimes it's utterly confusing. Sometimes we feel lost, sometimes we feel like we've got a handle on things. It's just all over the place, isn't it? But it's always this, right? It's like reality is wearing a different costume in every instant. It looks differently, right? It's garb, but it's always reality. It's always this. And this that's always here is the stability. We look for the stability in experience and circumstance and situation, right? But everything is being disappeared in that which we're looking to find security and stability, right? What's that line? I'm not any kind of like biblical scholar. Isn't there something about like not building your house on sand or something? How's that go? Those of you who know the Bible. Pat, can you help me out here? There's something about that, right? Like, um, I can't remember, but you know what I'm talking about. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. What is the passage? Do you remember?
No, I don't, but you're close.
Yeah,
It's
it's
right
something.
there.
It's
Yeah.
something about like you build your house on something that has no stability to it, and right, it's not going to work. So it's way more poetic, than I just said it. But um,
I think the general advice is to build it on stone. I think that's the end of the
something like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah
So what's the stone? Yeah,
the
build on
paradox.
rock, not on sand. Yeah, exactly, because the
Yeah,
sand has no stability. So we're what's there's also maybe it's the same passage, lay not your treasures, where moth and dust doth corrupt or something like that. Like everything's being taken away. Like that's things get rusty. They over time they decay. In fact, they're decaying every instant. So where do we find this stability that we long for? We find it in this that's always here. You could say the experiences have no stability, clearly, like this flash moment of experiencing is just gone the instant it arises. But there is this sense that call it the flow of experiencing itself or the flow of perceiving that's always here. It never goes away. It's indestructible. Absolutely indestructible. That's the ground. That's the ground that is what we are. That ground. It's what we're made of. Like everything is made of that that's always here. It's unbreakably here. It's indestructibly here. You know, I live in California here, and you know, earthquakes happen on occasion, sometimes big ones. Haven't had a big one in a while. Um, so where I'm sitting right now, the physical ground beneath me feels like it's pretty stable and, but that could change in a split second and suddenly the earth could rumble and maybe even in a very destructive way just um, quake and houses could fall apart, lots of destruction. So that kind of absolute like change, radical sort of change, in that even to that degree, where things are just falling apart like all around, and this would still be this. It just looks like an earthquake with lots of destruction. Not to minimize the experience of that destruction for those who are on the receiving end of it, right? Because that's there. But meanwhile, so if you're hoping your stability is to be found in, right, your circumstances remaining stable, that isn't going to happen. Sometimes it could be very cataclysmic, like a big earthquake or a fire or hurricane or tornado. But sometimes it's just the cataclysm of suddenly friendships ending or work changing or being lost or your favorite political candidate not getting elected or, whatever, whatever it is. Things, uh, things happen in the way that they happen for ultimately inexplicable reasons. And sometimes the way that the reality seems to be happening is not to our liking but meanwhile, here this is. The reality is unbreakable, even though it's constantly being broken by in its dynamism, broken in the sense of falling apart, and you know, the death and rebirth of what we call this is constant, right? Death and rebirth of what we call the moment, now, the present moment. So it's very weird. It's like you can't even find a present moment as I talk about because I mean, right? It's just exactly here for how long you can't grasp hold of it, and yet it's always this immediacy. It's always now. And the now is unbreakable, but unfindable at the same time. But in its unbreakable nature, then we find the stability that we're looking for. The only stability you'll ever find is this, the only thing that exists. Call it God if you like, but not the God that's somehow separate from all of this, the God that is all of this, the omnipresent God. Omnipresent means it's everything. So worlds collapsing, worlds falling, cataclysmic change and transformation all around within you, health changes, relationships change, circumstances change, experiences are constantly so obviously changing in every flash instant. So where again is the stability to be found? It feels very untethered and right, without a ground. There really is no ground, which turns out to be the ground. The ground of this ever-changing but always present reality. It's so funny, I've said this before in these meetings that, and I mentioned my graduate students, my poor graduate students that I exposed to this stuff. Um, and they go, my God, I didn't know I signed up for a philosophy class. I thought this was supposed to be a psychology class. I'm like, guys, I'm not talking philosophy. This moment that I'm describing is here for no time, which sounds very philosophical, but is literally, palpably, concretely, empirically, viscerally what's being felt is the inconstancy, the discontinuity, the slipperiness of the moment, right? But simultaneously, what also might sound philosophical to say it's never here for any time and yet it's always here sounds like ridiculous, like weird philosophy or something, is again exactly what we're experiencing, isn't it? Something's always here. It's always here. You feel that? It's always here. You can't say what that is. You can't put your finger on what that is. It's always here. That's the ungraspable nature because it's always moving away from us, right? It's like it's like moving towards the horizon. You never reach the horizon, right? Because it keeps moving away from you. But the moment keeps moving away because why? Because it's not here for any time. So the sense we have is as we go to look for the moment, it disappears. We can't find what it is, and yet it's always here. So when I say it's not philosophical, it's empirical, it's visceral, it's being felt. That's what I mean. It's like it's here. It's like it's always here. And so nothing has to happen for this to always be here. It just is always here. But we can notice that it's always here. And then it's like, oh, it's always here. I don't have to go look for it. I don't have to create some special set of circumstances and experiences in order for this to be always here. It just always is here, period. It's unconditioned by circumstance and experience, right? I mean, how many times in my life, in my own journey of exploring all of this, did I feel like I'd grasp hold of the thing I was looking for as an experience, only to have it slip away? Like what I didn't realize was it was slipping away way faster than I even realized, but that would seem like it was around for a while and then it would go away. When I left the retreat or whatever, seemed to have catalyzed that moment of presence that I felt, or clarity or whatever, however I was describing it. But that's the flimsiest of realizations. The realizations that are tied to particular experiences, that is so flimsy. And you all know this because otherwise we wouldn't have this experience of like, wow, I really saw it so clearly and now it feels like it slipped away. It's like the nature of this is to slip away. Like that's it. The nature is to slip away. I just came across this. My friend Dina just posted this wonderful quote from Alan Watts, who I adore, and I'm going to share it with my grad students because it's so apropos. Like I've been trying to convey to them why discovering that there's not separation, that there's not a separate individual apart from reality, you could call that self-transcendence, why that has such psychological implications, so many implications for our well-being, because they're kind of like, why would I ever want to pursue that? What does that have to do with psychology? But this quote of Watts really captures it. Um, he says, this is in from his book, The Wisdom of Insecurity, which is a great title. Like insecurity, like who wants insecurity? Well, we don't want it, but it's what we have. So anyway, Watt says there's a contradiction in wanting to be perfectly secure in a universe whose very nature is momentariness and fluidity, right? Like I was saying. That's a contradiction because we want a certain kind of security, and yet we're looking for it in a universe that is constantly like in its fluidity, not not secure in that sense. He says, but the contradiction lies a little deeper than the mere conflict between the desire for security and the fact of change. If I want to be secure, that is protected. In other words, if I want to be secure, that is protected from the flux of life. I'm wanting to be separate from life, right? Like, I don't like all this. I want to get away from all this insecurity, all this flux of life, so I can find my security apart from all this flux, is what he's saying, right? Yet it is this very sense of separateness which makes me feel insecure. Isn't that just brilliant? Like, right? To be secure means to isolate and fortify the I, but it is just the feeling of being an isolated I which makes me feel lonely and afraid. In other words, the more security I can get, the more I shall want. To put it still more plainly, the desire for security and the feeling of insecurity are the same thing, right? All this dynamism that I was describing, that complete lack of stability of reality, it's only by trying to separate ourselves out from that that creates the sense of insecurity. But when you realize you are that, where's the insecurity? There's just this constant dynamism with nobody on the terrible receiving end of that insecurity, right? You see what I mean? It's like there's no, who would have guessed that this radical instability and uncertainty and insecurity was exactly what we wanted? It's what we are, this dynamism that, again, paradoxically, of course, is always here. But, just let yourself feel that always here-ness for a moment. Like, wow, it's always here. No matter what I'm thinking, it's here. No matter what emotions are arising, it's here. This is here, right? No matter what is happening sensorially, no matter what's going on in the world, it's here. No matter what I might imagine to be missing, it's here. You see? Nothing can break it. There's nothing outside of it to break it, for one thing. And you feel how unbreakable it is. It's like, oh man, this is it. This is home that cannot be destroyed by anything. And yet it's constantly vanishing, but always here.